Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another live episode of The Breakdown. It is December 21st, I think, 2025. This will be our last show of 2025, believe it or not. So that's a thing that's happening. And it's not going to be, we're trying not to, he said, damning himself to probably a 4-hour show. We've only got a couple of topics that we're going to try to hit on tonight to keep it light because everybody's in the silly season, and it has been a crushing legislative session for the last couple of months. So we're gonna keep focused. Doesn't mean we're gonna be pulling our punches in any way, because we absolutely will not be. But does mean that probably will hopefully go a little bit short. Before we get into the program proper, though, I want to say another big thank you to all of our Patreon supporters who showed up last night for our little holiday online. I don't know, whatever that was. It was a blast. I had so much fun. And so I just really wanted to reiterate and double down on the thank yous for that. Let's get into it. It's the last one of the year. That's so wild. We're going to be taking 2 weeks off. So we'll be coming back the first week of January. And we've already got some things lined up in the queue because this is where we are. But we're going to take 2 weeks off from the podcast, the YouTube, all of that. So there's the first piece. The second piece, the big news is after a summer of yelling and mics being shut off and threats of spankings, because it is Alberta politics, the Alberta Next panel released its recommendations. Now, we're going to take a look at what these recommendations are, because there's some things that are very much going to have a pressing impact on Alberta. But it's important to keep in mind right off of the top that the chair, the person who was in charge, the big boss, the boss late, I ran out of things there. I went in with so much and it just did not last. The boss, the director supreme, the head honcho was Danielle Smith. So the Premier of Alberta was the chair, the big boss of the Alberta Next panel series, tour, consent manufacturing exercise. And so as we go through the recommendations of the Alberta Next panel, it's really important to keep that in mind, because this is in many ways, in effect, Danielle Smith saying to herself, "Hey, self, what should we do?" And then responding, "Well, Danny, I think this is what we should do." And then responding again, "Thanks, Danny, I think you're right." So that's the reality that you have to keep in mind. So there are very real questions to be asked about the legitimacy, but we're going to go through each of the recommendations, because there's some stuff that's kind of smaller, that's kind of bigger. So let's get right into it with recommendation number 1. This one is the boring sauce one of all of them. It recommends that the government of Alberta should be responsible and self-government. The government of Alberta should continue to build and support institutions for trusted, responsible self-government to reduce Alberta's dependence on Ottawa and strengthen Alberta's respect within the Federation. Now, I don't know about the degree to which Alberta is respected inside of the Federation. I think that there's a lot of people that kind of look at us as that guy in many ways, or that gal, because we're very good at temper tantrums and making demands. But when it comes to working collaboratively with other provinces, certainly our neighbor to the west, we're not doing so great there. And that is not a product of Ottawa. That is a product of how Alberta's leadership for the last 10 years or so has chosen to behave. Maybe not quite 10 years. We're getting close. The temper tantrums, the demands, all of those sorts of things, that does not engender respect. If anything, it engenders mockery. And I don't have to think much farther past the reaction that I got from a lot of folks initially when we did a little trip this summer, and there were a lot of folks who were like, "Oh, Alberta." So maybe it's not the Ottawa so much that's the problem with how the rest of the country perceives us. Maybe it's how we conduct ourselves. Not saying, just saying. Moving on to recommendation number 2. And this one is where the consent manufacturing really kicks in, because recommendation 2 is all about the Alberta pension plan. And the recommendation is proceed to referendum on establishing an Alberta pension plan and exiting the Canadian pension plan after first providing Albertans with a detailed Alberta pension plan proposal outlining what benefits, management structure, contribution rates, and implementation plan an APP would include. The government should put a referendum question to Albertans on the topic of whether or not Alberta should exit the CPP and replace it with an APP. As per existing legislation, this is conditional on that the new Alberta pension plan providing same or better pension benefits for Alberta seniors at the same or lower premium cost for Alberta workers than the Canadian pension plan. Prior to a referendum on the topic being held, the government should provide Albertans with more information on the advantages and risks associated with taking this course of action, and further provide information as to what benefits, management structure, contribution rates, and implementation strategy the government would include in establishing an Alberta pension plan. So they want the referendum on the Alberta pension plan, despite the fact that the polling historically is very much no thank you. Even their own internal polling has it clear that a majority of Albertans absolutely do not want an Alberta pension plan. They do not want to exit the CPP. But this is the theme that we're going to see as we kind of go through this. The recommendations of the report are, so if we wanted to do this, what do we have to do first? What do we have to do to get people to buy in, to be on board? And that's what that recommendation on the pension piece is basically about. So that same thing we did with the videos and the town halls and the panels specific to the Alberta pension plan. It sounds like we're going to be doing that all over again. And this is another reason why I know. And if I'm wrong, cool. But this is another one of the reasons why I look at all of the rhetoric that's going on surrounding the possibility of an early election, and I go, I just don't see it. Because if you look at all of the recommendations on what the government has to do in order to pursue a lot of the referendum questions, a lot of it is public education, a lot of it is campaigning. And this is all things that the UCP get to do as government on the taxpayer's dime. So why would you call an election when you could run the risk of losing and you would have to spend all of the money that your party has built up over the last few years, when you could just use the referendums as your campaign and use all of the taxpayers' money as the way by which to convince all of the people of all of the things? It's an exercise in democracy, don't you see? And so we're going to do it that way. We're going to let Albertans have their voice because we believe in direct democracy. The story writes itself. And it's really quite, I don't know. I just don't, everybody's all like, oh, February election. And I just don't see it for that simple reason. It's dollars and cents. It's dollars and cents. And there's no reason to call an early election when they can campaign, in effect, for free for the UCP on the taxpayer's dime on all of the referendum stuffs. And if they lose that election, all of this referendum stuff could very easily be toast. Because as we've seen in this legislative session, laws can be changed at a moment's notice. And if there was a provincial election, you better bet that the top two parties at least would be saying, oh yeah, all of the things that Danny did, we're going to undo because a lot of them are really, really bad. So all of the progress would be eliminated. Progress, air quoting the hell out of the progress. But that's why I don't buy the early election. And if we get a month into or 2 months into next year and they call an early election, I'll be the first one to be like, well, there's that, I guess. And then we will be so busy all over again. But I just don't see it. Moving on from there, recommendation number 3 has to do with tax collection. And this is an interesting one because this is where they say, maybe we don't hold a referendum right now. Recommendation number 3, do not hold a referendum on Alberta personal income tax collection at this time. Instead, complete a detailed cost-benefit analysis of the potential initiative for future consideration by Albertans in cooperation with qualified third parties. Oh, there's some folks going to be making some money. The Alberta government should conduct a detailed cost-benefit analysis and implementation plan for Alberta to simplify, restructure, and take over collection of personal income tax from the federal government for future consideration by Albertans. So yet again, it's the same thing. We're going to do this, just not right now. First, we didn't quite get all of the consent manufacturer. We have to go back to the consent manufacturing factory for a second and see if we can't, with some numbers, show Albertans, hey, look, if everything goes perfectly and you squint just right, we could make, this could be great. We should do it. But we're not going to do it right now because people aren't convinced. So the things that we see that they're pumping the brakes on, maybe not so much, are the things they know they don't have the public support for. And I personally think that's a lot of how this exercise with the Alberta Next panel should be interpreted. The things that they know they have support for, well, we're going to get to those in a minute. And the things that they know they don't have support for yet, well, let's use the government resources to try to convince people that this is what we should be doing. And again, this is why I go back to, I just don't buy the early election thing. Recommendation number 4 is equalization. Do not hold a referendum on equalization and federal transfers. Instead, Alberta should take a leading role in working with other provinces and the federal government to reform equalization and fiscal federalism. Work with other provinces and the federal government to transfer a portion of income tax and GST revenues to provincial governments in return for the elimination of strings-attached federal transfers in health, childcare, and other social services. And I'm sorry, I'm editorializing. I just want to read that paragraph again. They want the federal government to transfer a portion of income tax and GST revenues to provincial governments in return for the elimination of strings-attached federal transfers in health, childcare, and other services. So the pitch is to the federal government, hey, all those conditions that you put on how we spend the money as we privatize healthcare in the province, boy, those conditions, they seem like a lot of work. Do you really want to be doing all that work? We'll tell you what. In exchange for you not having to do the work of the conditions anymore, you can just give us the cash. That's one of my favorite paragraphs in this whole thing so far. Work with other provinces and the federal government to fund the 4 largest Canadian provinces on a much more equitable per capita basis for overall transfers and spending, and ensure that a reformed equalization program continues to support smaller provinces in delivering core public services while better aligning incentives for all provinces to pursue growth-enhancing policies. Take the lead in establishing with other provinces a Canadian Fiscal Commission tasked with proposing equalization updates every 5 years and tracking federal redistribution between provinces annually to improve fairness and transparency. I can't remember who was the last folks that did so this is the thing. If you take a look at the history of equalization, I believe it was an Albertan what proposed the program. And we have had conservative governments who have chosen not to make massive changes to how equalization is administered, because as much as it is Alberta's favorite thing to bitch and moan about, and yes, I'm not going to sit here and pretend equalization is perfect. There's some problems with it for sure. But even if you take a look at what those problems are, they don't make a tremendous difference. Trevor Choom, who was on, much to the chagrin of many people, who was on the Alberta Next panel, just released a column today where he talked about the fact that even the changes that people are talking about that they desperately want making, it's a tiny little thing. And so when we start to talk about how we're going to tinker with equalization, it is in fine-tuning. At best, it's not going to be the sweeping change that everybody believes or wants to see that it's going to be. So when even the guy who was on the panel is like, yeah, there's improvements to be made, but they're very small and they won't make a big difference. So good talk, everybody. Then that's probably a good sign that there's improvements to be made, but they won't make a big difference. And here's where, so far with all of our our things and stuffs. We've had 3 recommendations saying we should do more public education. We should convince people why these ideas are so good. We've had one that says, well, we can't really do very much about it without all the other provinces on board. So guess we should probably try to get the provinces on board. There's that. And now we get to, we're going to do it anyways. Because when we take a look at the recommendations on the Alberta Provincial Police Service, recommendation number 5 is proceed with establishing an Alberta Police Service. Apps. There's an apps for that. And transition community policing services from the RCMP to the apps and municipal policing services. Prior to the expiration of the RCMP agreement in 2032, the province should provide appropriate notice to the federal government that Alberta will be ending its community policing contract with the RCMP and work cooperatively with the RCMP to complete an orderly and effective transition of community policing responsibilities to the apps and municipal policing services as appropriate. Work with municipalities to transition to a local municipal police force or provincial police service model on a cost-neutral or better basis. Ensure all current RCMP officers and staff are provided the opportunity to be employed in the new apps. Given more than 80% of Albertans already have community policing services provided to them by municipal police services and the Alberta Sheriffs, a provincial referendum would be inappropriate. So, we don't need, despite all of the polling that hasn't been done by shitty online surveys, despite all of the polling that says Albertans absolutely do not want to get rid of the RCMP, the recommendation from Danielle Smith to Danielle Smith is to get rid of the RCMP. And it's wild because even their own surveys, they're bending the numbers pretty hard. From the report again, the polling that they got, the in-person straw polls. So the in-person straw polls that they did at the Alberta Next events that the UCP seated with UCP members and made sure that they promoted to their membership. In a shocking turn of events, the straw polls conducted by Bruce McAllister, clear majority support. Online survey comments, clear majority opposed. Professional polling survey, 52% of Albertans opposed. But they've thrown the caveat in. They were unable, the polling that they did was unable to target only those 20% of Albertans served by the RCMP rather than municipal policing services. So let's be very, very clear. For recommendation number 5, I think it is. The province, the good folks of the Alberta Next panel, Danny talking to Danny, is saying, yeah, so we don't have any data on what rural actually wants. 52% of Albertans at least don't want to get rid of the RCMP in our poll that we did. And the online response was very clear that they don't want to, Albertans don't want to get rid of the RCMP, but I really, really, really want my own police force. All I want for Christmas is my own police force. And that'll get to be relevant in just a minute here, rest assured. But so I'm going to do it. I'm just going to say, you know what? We're just going to do it. We're going to do the Alberta Police Board. No referendum, no public say, despite the fact that the recommendations themselves acknowledge that a majority of Albertans do not want this thing, and they don't have data to say differently. Despite all of that, they're just going to recommend that we plow. Danny's going to recommend to Danny that we plow ahead and get rid of the RCMP in the province of Alberta, which is bonkers. For a premier who says how much she just loves democracy and direct democracy so very much, and we have to have a permissive approach to democracy, this is pretty wild. And again, this is another one of those areas where it's not difficult to look at this and go, gosh, I wonder if somebody's going to raise $25,000 and this is going to be a referendum question. It's not hard to imagine. Not hard to imagine at all. I feel like there's a market out there for some company that's going to be like Bob's Referendum Service. We provide the very, very best in the logistics of referenduming. And we're probably going to see something like that pop up in the very near future, I imagine, because Danny's saying she wants to do what she wants to do, and that's that. Also, in that realm, recommendation number 6 has to do with immigration. And if you remember the videos, they were pretty gross. Lots of people at the town halls called them out as blaming all of Alberta's problems inappropriately on immigration. We're going to talk about that, believe you me. But recommendation number 6, proceed to referendum on government exercising more control over immigration. And when they say government, they're talking about the provincial government. The government should put a referendum question to Albertans on the topic of the government exercising more control over immigration policy for the purpose of ensuring more sustainable population growth, attracting primarily economic migrants, and limiting eligibility for social services to citizens, permanent residents, and individuals with an immigration permit granted or otherwise recognized by the Alberta government. And let's be clear, there's a lot to unpack there, because the direct implication of that little claim is, oh, we give all of these social services to people who aren't permanent residents, individual with an immigration permit granted, or citizens. We're just handing out willy-nilly all of these social services to people who aren't supposed to be here. They aren't allowed to be here. It's so bad. And it's also not really true, which is part of the problem. And we're gonna get to the clips. Don't you worry, because boy did Danny this week. But you know what? Let's get to the clips right away, because I want you to take that whole thing, that recommendation number 6, the referendum question on. I'm going to read the paragraph again. Government should put a referendum question to Albertans on the topic of the government exercising more control over immigration policy for the purposes of ensuring more sustainable economic growth. That sounds good, right? Attracting primarily economic migrants, and limiting eligibility for social services to citizens, permanent residents, and individuals with an immigration permit granted or otherwise recognized by the Alberta government. Now, the subtext of that last line is, you could be somebody who the federal government has said, yes, you may immigrate to Canada. But if you don't also have approval from the province, which turns into a bit of a constitutional charter issue, if you don't have that from the province, then you don't get access to any of the services. And there are some clips that have been making the rounds on the social medias for the last couple of days. Very short ones. We found the longer ones. We will listen to one in just a second, of Danielle Smith in her comfort zone. Oh, she's sitting down for a year end with Ezra, she is. And she gets very comfortable speaking very directly about her thoughts.
We used to have an enviable immigration system based on points, bringing in professionals, giving extra points for people who had degrees and could speak one of the official languages, and they blew that up. That we received a very large number of temporary workers, refugees, family reunification, international students, pretty much everyone but the economic migrants that had always been the source of its success. And we're seeing it. It has brought our public services almost to the brink of collapse. That's one of the challenges that we faced in our education system, is we went from having a stagnant enrollment in our system to having a net new 85,000 kids added, 96,000 of which speak English as a second language, or English language learners, which is double what we saw 3 years ago. It's put enormous pressure. People are seeing the pressure in being able to get a doctor or nurse practitioner. They're seeing a pressure on buying a house, getting rent. The price of everything is going up, and they're frustrated. When I was going around with the Alberta Next panel, we heard of parents and grandparents saying, my kid or my grandkid has applied for dozens of jobs, even at McDonald's and Tim Hortons, and can't get one. So what we have asked the federal government to do, and it looks like they're curtailing many of those programs. We've been supportive of the changes that they've made, particularly on the temporary foreign worker program. But the federal government's irresponsibility has put huge costs onto our taxpayers. And so what I've looked at in the UK, Keir Starmer, he's having this conversation about whether you have to work for 5 years before you are able to receive social services. I believe that's their current policy. They're talking about making a person wait 10 years. And so you should come to Alberta because you have a job. You should be a taxpayer first. And then if you want to stay and become a permanent resident, that's when you can bring in your wife and your kids, and you can start on the pathway to permanent citizenship. We believe that those who are not here in a permanent status should be treated like tourists. And as a tourist, you don't go to somebody else's country and say, pay for my childcare, pay for my education, pay for my healthcare, pay for my long-term care, give me a pension. We have to get back to something approaching a consensus around immigration again. And so that's what we're going to be looking to Albertans to see if they want to give us a mandate to do that.
There is so much to unpack there. But before we do, did you hear it? Right at the beginning? Danny Meth.
That's one of the challenges that we faced in our education system, is we went from having a stagnant enrollment in our system to having a net new 85,000 kids added, 96,000 of which speak English as a second language.
We added 85,000 new kids, to the education system. We added 85,000 new kids, 96,000 of which. So we added 85,000, and of that 85,000, 96,000 were English as a second language. I'm not sure, but I don't think that you get to do 96,000 of 85,000 because there's only 85,000. But this is the problem. Danny's riffing hard there. She's going really big into these 96,000 of the 85,000. They came in and they spoke strange languages, and it's very difficult with those numbers because they can't possibly be real, for one. But also they're taking our jobs. They're taking our jobs. The stories about the grandparents saying that their kids couldn't get the jobs at the Tim Hortons or any of those other places. They're taking the jobs. That's not a trope that we've seen throughout history that always ends spectacularly poorly. The people with the temporary foreign workers, they're coming in, they're taking our jobs. But there's also a lot else in there that's just quite frankly bullshit, because she talked about, they're coming in and they're getting tourists. We should treat them like tourists. We should be like, hey, you don't get healthcare or education or childcare or a pension. This is, by the way, and we're going to get to the pension piece in a minute, but the premier who wants to bring in an Alberta pension seems to think that's how pensions work. That you could just go to a country and be like, hey, I've never contributed in any way economically, but I would like a pension, please. It's simply not how things work. And to demonstrate this fact, to be crystal clear, because when the premier of the province gets up and says, oh, hey, all of these programs, these social services that people get access to, we should have rules about, what the criteria are. We thought, hey, let's take a look at some of these social programs and see what the rules are. So starting with, this is a federal program, old age security, because those people over the age of 65, they just come to Canada to get the free checks. And that's not true. In order to qualify for old age security, you have to be 65 years or older. And if you're living in Canada, you must be a Canadian citizen or a legal resident at the time we approve your OAS pension application and have resided in Canada for at least 10 years since the age of 18. They put for at least 10 years since the age of 18 in bold. So let's be very, very clear here. Old age pension is not something that you just get. Well, but the healthcare, what about the healthcare? Well, let's take a look at what the criteria are for Alberta healthcare. So AHCIP is Alberta Healthcare Insurance Program. You are eligible for Alberta Healthcare Insurance coverage if you are legally entitled to be and remain in Canada and make your permanent home in Alberta. So you legally have to be allowed to be here in order to get access to Alberta Healthcare. You have to be committed to being physically present in Alberta for at least 183 days in any 12-month period. You must not be claiming residency or obtaining benefits under a claim of residency in another province, territory, or country. Any other person deemed by the regulations to be a resident or temporary resident, not including a tourist, transient, or visitor to Alberta. So let's be very, 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 very clear. Tourists, that's from the Government of Alberta website. Tourists already don't get Alberta healthcare. You have to be a resident. You have to live here in order to get Alberta healthcare. You're not a tourist. What about the Canadian pension plan? Pensions, Danny says. Well, in order to get a CPP retirement pension, you have to be at least 60 years old and have made at least one valid contribution to the CPP. But this is where we have to talk for a quick sec about what is it at anybody who's been paying attention to the Alberta pension plan file. Like, hopefully, I don't know, the chair of that organization, that group, that panel, would know everybody's pension is individual to them. So your pension benefits are determined by how much money you pay into the CPP throughout the course of your working lifetime. If you don't pay, then you don't get a pension. If you do pay, your pension varies on a bunch of other different things. But it's individualized. It's based on your own income tax. So you can't come to Canada and be like, la la la, I have never paid taxes in Canada, but I would like a pension, please. It doesn't work that way. You can't get it. I don't know why Danny is just including pensions as something that she thinks that people can just get. Oh, but wait, maybe she meant provincial programs. Maybe she meant, I don't know, the Alberta Seniors Benefit. Let's take a look at the eligibility for that. You have to be 65 years of older, have lived in Alberta for at least 3 months immediately before applying, be a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident, receive the old age security pension from the government of Alberta, and meet financial eligibility criteria. So even if you've lived in Alberta for at least 3 months before you applied, you still have to be able to get the old age security pension, and you have to be a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident. So even there, all of the it's not just I showed up and therefore I'm getting the things and the stuff. Well, she mentioned childcare too, didn't she? Well, let's take a look at what the childcare rules are. So you can apply for the childcare subsidy, which will pay part of your childcare if you and your spouse or partner or the child receiving care are Canadian citizens or permanent residents of Canada, temporary residents with a valid work permit, refugee claimants or protected persons claimants, individuals unable to return to their countries of origin because they fear persecution. You or your spouse or partner are an Alberta resident. You and your spouse or partner, and this is again important. You have to be working or looking for work, attending school, or have special needs, or your child has a special need. Your children are 12 years old or younger and attending full-time kindergarten 5 days per week, or grades 1 through 6. Your children have a secured spot in a licensed facility-based child care program or a family day home program that is overseen by a licensed agency. And this is important to realize about the child care subsidy. It's income tested. So the maximum amount that you can get is $644 for 100 hours. And that's if you're making less than $49,999. The least amount that you can get is $92, and that's if you're making $89,999. And after $90,000, you don't get anything. So the folks that are getting the childcare subsidies, it's very, very small. And there are very, very clear criteria that exist. But gosh, so to sum it up, in effect, you either have to be somebody who has fled from a country that is trying to kill you, you have to be a permanent resident, or you have to be a citizen of Canada in order to access the overwhelming majority of the major programs. Well, what does it take to get permanent residency? Can you just do that overnight? No, you absolutely cannot. You have to come to Canada before you're 19 years old, or you have to have continuously resided in Canada for at least 3 years before you apply. So you have to have lived in Canada for at least 3 years if you weren't a kid. Have continuously resided in Canada since you were 19 years old, if you're now over 19 years, have been under the legal responsibility of a child family services provider under a provincial or territory government's designated ministry for child protection for at least 1 year, be physically present in Canada when you submit your application and when we grant you permanent residence, not be a person against whom there are serious reasons for considering that you've committed a crime against peace, war crime, or serious non-criminal crime outside of Canada. You've been guilty of acts contrary to the purposes and principles of the United Nations, have a valid passport, travel document, rena. But the Coles Notes is you have to be either have come to Canada before you were 19, you have to have continuously resided in Canada for at least 3 years before you apply. It's not, permanent resident is not It's not a no-step process. And that's from the Government of Canada's own website right there. So there's a lot of things that Danny said in there that have to do with the whole question of reality, because it's just not true. Nobody is arguing that if you're a coming to Canada and you've only been here for 5 minutes and you've never contributed to the economy, that you should get a pension. Nobody's making that argument. But there is a valid argument to be made about what happens if we start to say, hey, if you have elderly parents, you can't bring them to Alberta. We will refuse them healthcare, for example. And by the way, assisted living, that was another one of the things that she threw in there. In order to qualify for assisted living or long-term care facilities, that's an insured service. And in order to have access to an insured service, you have to have an Alberta healthcare card, which again goes all the way back to the beginning of the conversation, where there's legal criteria to be having those Alberta healthcare cards. So it's a gross misrepresentation of what's actually going on. And it's a racist dog whistle at the end of the day to try to make the argument that, oh, all of these people that are coming here, they're ruining everything. They're ruining the education. They're ruining the healthcare, despite all evidence to the contrary that very, very strongly demonstrates that the reason why we're seeing struggles in education and healthcare is because of decades of underfunding by governments that wanted to get away with the absolute bare minimum. And now that the chickens have come home to roost, they're saying, oh, well, we got to have a bad guy that's not us. Let's blame the immigrants. It's much more complex than that. And any politician who tries to present a complex problem as having simple causes and simple solutions is just lying to you. But then again, it is Danny. So there is that, I guess. Recommendation number 7 is another rather jarring one. And again, it recommends proceeding to referendum on specific constitutional amendments. The government should put one or more referendum questions to Albertans on whether Alberta should work with other provinces and the federal government to amend the Canadian Constitution to better protect provincial powers from federal government interference, to permit provinces to opt out of federal programs in areas of provincial jurisdiction without losing the associated federal funding, and to allow provinces to appoint their own King's Bench and Court of Appeal justices. It should also consider a question on whether or not to abolish the unelected federal Senate. Hey, have we ever talked about abolishing the unelected Senate here in Alberta? Have we ever done that exercise? We have. We've done that exercise. And we know that Albertans have said, yes, we would like to have our own elected senators. And the federal government said, cute. You should have one of them go start a podcast. That was an Erica Baruti's joke. But the thing that's really jarring about this is Danielle Smith and the UCP have spent the last couple of weeks denigrating the courts and denigrating judges, saying that appointed judges are horribly biased. You can't trust appointed judges. Oh, that justice who said on the referendum question from the Alberta Prosperity Project that the question is not constitutional. It is a violation of the Constitution, and said that any separation has to have the endorsement of all of the treaty partners. That judge, that Justin Trudeau appointed judge, he's so biased. We don't like him. So we want to appoint our own biased judges, I guess. And this is the thing. There is a hierarchy of judginess. And in order to get appointed to the higher levels of the courts, you have to have a bit of a track record. Nobody gets out of law school and is like, bam, you get to be a new Court of King's Bench judge. Bam, you get to be a new Court of Appeal judge. It's not a thing. And to suggest the judges at the highest levels of the courts are biased or not impartial without any evidence whatsoever is very clearly a tool used to try to say, hey, you know what I would really like? I would like to have the judges appointed that I know are biased, that I know will rule in the way that we want them to. And if there's anything that we've learned from the UCP, particularly under Danielle Smith, is that they are more than happy to erode, if not pave over the guardrails that exist that are supposed to keep people who have significant power in check. Danielle Smith and the UCP have made it very, very clear that they don't like those guardrails. They want what they want when they want it. And this whole report with its recommendations is an exercise in them repeating that mantra. We want what we want when we want it. And the notion that an Alberta panel would be able to convince the rest of Confederation to just go ahead and rewrite the Constitution, I mean, this is very clearly yet another PR exercise, because anybody who knows anything about the Canadian Constitution and the extraordinarily high threshold that it takes to make revisions knows that's even more of a pipe dream than Danny's pipeline through unceded territories in BC. It's not going to happen. And so, again, we have referendum questions on things that are outside of the scope of what the province can accomplish. Not because it's a responsible use of taxpayers' money, because these referendums don't come cheap. Not because it's a responsible use of taxpayers' money, not because it's a responsible use of the electorate's time, but because Danny has an agenda that she wants to pursue and she needs people to be angry to do it. And just to get back to that was the last referendum recommendation. There were 7. Just to get back to the silliness about this government and the withholding social services, I wanted to save this one for last, because the implication that we should not, and it's happening. There have been news stories in the last several months about kids who came to Canada who don't meet the criteria, who want to go to school, and certain schools and school boards are saying, no, you cannot go to school. You shall not learn. Let's take a quick look at what the criteria are for kids in schools. If we can. I don't know if we can. We may not be able to. We don't have that graphic. Disregard. I'll just read it. So as of September 1st, every child who meets the following criteria is allowed access to education if they are 6 years of age or older and younger than 19 years of age. One of the following: a Canadian citizen, has been admitted to Canada for permanent residence, has a parent who is a Canadian citizen, or has a parent who has been admitted to Canada for permanent or temporary residence. That's who's allowed to access education. And this is bonkers to me on so many levels anyways, because I cannot imagine the good that comes out of saying to a kid who wants to go to school, no, you shall not go to school because you don't meet these criteria. Any kid who wants to go to school should be allowed to go to school. It should not be a privilege. It should be a basic human right. And the fact that we're wishy-washy about it is quite frankly just horrifying to me. One of the other ones that I wanted to say for the end, because this is another one of the ones that gets grossly misrepresented, is what is soon to be the ADAP program, but is AISH, assisted income for the assured income for the severely handicapped. The eligibility for AISH is you have a medical condition that substantially limits your ability to earn a living. Your medical condition is likely to remain permanent. There is no medical treatment, therapy, rehabilitation, or training available that will help improve your ability to earn a living. You are at least 18 years old and not eligible to receive an old age security pension. You live in Alberta and you are a Canadian citizen or permanent resident. You are not in a correctional facility or some mental health facility such as Alberta Hospital Edmonton. You must meet financial eligibility criteria. So even AISH, that has been denigrated and demonized as a program that you can just, anybody can get on. I mean, talk to anybody who's on age and they'll tell you it is not an easy process by any stretch of the imagination. And there's a lot of very real concerns that we're going to be taking a look at the new year much deeper about the ADAP program, because some of the legislative changes that slipped through the cracks are absolutely bonkers. But it's not easy. And again, you have to be a citizen or a permanent resident. So what are we talking about with all of these people who are getting all of these social programs without being a citizen or a permanent resident? It's just laughable. And if it would be laughable if it wasn't so offensive. Again, I want to be clear. There's no question that the province has serious problems. There's no question that those serious problems require serious looks at them. But to try to say, well, let's just blame the immigrants, not the good ones, the bad ones, is a pretty irresponsible thing for any leader who doesn't want to go down in the history books with a very particular tone written about them. It's a bold choice. But Danny's playing from a very particular playbook. So if we go back and we look at those recommendations, what does Danielle Smith want? Well, she wants a referendum on greater independence. She'd like some free money, please, with no strings attached. She'd like to be able to appoint her own judges. That should be able to happen in the provinces, because if there's no sort of independent oversight, what could possibly go wrong? It's not like Alberta has It's not like Alberta has a justice minister who recently made himself immune from being held accountable within the Law Society for decisions that he made. That's not a red flag over, maybe we should let this guy appoint the Court of King's Bench judges. I mean, to some people, it probably would be a red flag. I don't know. And she wants her own police force. She's pushing ahead with her own police force without any consultation other than this little sham panel. She's just going to go ahead and do it, despite the fact that the report itself says that there is not evidence to say that the people who are being policed by the RCMP are unhappy. There simply isn't evidence to say that. So that's what she wants to do. And while all of this is going on, so Danny wants her own courts, she wants her own police, and she wants to blame the problems on the immigrants. And this brings us back to the rebel.
I was talking to Michelle Garner-Rempel of the Federal Conservatives, who's their immigration critic, and I said to her, there's all these people who their visas have expired and they have not been asked to leave. I said, would you support mass deportations or remigration? And to my surprise, she said yes, even if the number's hundreds of thousands or perhaps millions. That word remigration, I've seen it used in the States. They're talking about it in the UK. Do you think that perhaps it's time that Canada say to those who have overstayed, time to go home?
Well, the first step is making sure that you're not bringing people here who don't have a job to come to. So I think that's one part of it. The second part is, for those who are here and have a job and have a pathway to permanent migration, let's just be compassionate and find those permanent residents, give them permanent residency status so they can start on that journey. But anyone who doesn't have a job, doesn't have prospects, absolutely, why would they stay? It's not good for them. It's not good for the taxpayer.
The taxpayer, you see, it's all about the taxpayer. And that's a pretty good indication that we're going to see the mass deportations very quickly rebranded in the new year, at least in the province of Alberta, as remigration. Here's a fun fact, and anybody can Google this. Go ahead and do it right now if you'd like. Danny's concern is all about, if people aren't paying taxes to Alberta, they shouldn't be getting the social services. If they haven't spent at least 10 years paying taxes to Alberta, then they shouldn't be getting the social services. They shouldn't have access to those things because they haven't paid the taxes to Alberta. You know that thing that so many of the Danny brand of conservatives love? No, not punching down on the vulnerable folks. The other thing, the Alberta Advantage. What is that again exactly? Let me see if I can remember. It has something to do with taxation. It has something to do with all of the exemptions that are available for people inside of Alberta to decrease their tax burden. I wonder what that looks like. I don't have to because I Googled it right before the show. And if you take a look at what percentage of tax filers, so these are the people who are filing their taxes. They have got the jobs. They're filing their taxes. They're very, very good Albertans. They're doing all the things that Danny says she wants. What percentage of them actually end up paying income tax to the province of Alberta? If you think it's 100%, you're wrong. If you think it's 90%, you're still wrong. If you think it's 80%, you're still wrong, because it turns out roughly 60% of people who file their taxes end up paying provincial income tax because of that Alberta advantage. So I guess at the end of the day, it's not about, but you have to pay your taxes in order to get the social services, because 40% of tax filing Albertans do not pay any income tax to the province of Alberta. This is manufactured rage, and it is perfectly on brand for this government that loves to manufacture rage towards the demographics that don't have the resources or the microphones to defend themselves appropriately from a government that's bringing its full weight to bear on them for nothing more than political convenience and expedience. Moving on from there. Let's talk about, the healthcare crisis. Because that's the reality. And this is we're going to get to the question. The folks on the Patreon, they heard me ask this question last night, but we're going to get to the question. And I would challenge anybody, once Danny gets back from Panama in the new year, because she's going to be out of the country for a little bit apparently, but once she gets back, I would challenge anyone to ask her this question that I will ask after I've given you a little bit of what's going on. This is a slide from, let's do the DMs first. We'll do the DMs first. So these are just a couple of DMs that we've received over the last week talking about the state of healthcare across the province. If Calgarians knew how many calls were impending, waiting for an ambulance today, they would be absolutely horrified. This is just next level bad. Another one, Red Deer Emergency Department is a nightmare right now. Consistently every day, over 30 emergency department inpatients, ZDIP, I believe, and at times over 100 people in the department. This is this last week in hospitals in Calgary was the worst I've seen since the pandemic. Emergency rooms are understaffed and overwhelmed. Don't even ask how many times Calgary had no ambulances available. And so this is probably where I have to do the boilerplate disclosure that these were DMs that were sent into the breakdown. Yes, I work professionally as a paramedic. I'm not going to speak to any sort of proprietary information that I have through my role as being a paramedic. And I do not in any way want the fact that I work as a paramedic to, I'm not speaking for anybody but myself. But there's a story that came out of Edmonton. It's this story right here. And this story is not only heartbreaking for the first responders involved, but it's also a damning indictment on where Danny wants to take the province. And I'm just going to take a minute to read some of that from you. We may playfully tease each other from time to time, but the first responder community is a small one, and we always strive to have each other's backs as we work together in unpredictable and dangerous environments. Firefighters, police officers, and paramedics have a long history of backing each other up and answering calls for assistance. Unfortunately, earlier this week, we were unable to help an Edmonton police officer when they needed us. A call for immediate EMS assistance was made by Edmonton Police for an officer that suffered serious injuries while arresting a suspect. There were no ambulances available in the city at that time, and the officer had to be transported to the hospital in the back of a police vehicle. The safety of first responders relies on our ability to answer each other's call for assistance in a timely manner with adequate resources. We appreciate EPS officers always being there for us to help secure our scenes to keep us safe. We are saddened that in this instance, we were unable to be there for our first responder colleague. We wish them speedy recovery, and we hope this never happens again. This is yet another somber reminder of how dire the EMS crisis has become. There should never be a single moment where zero ambulances are available. That is from the Edmonton Paramedics Facebook group. It has been confirmed. It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking for the first responders involved. I can only imagine how frustrating and scary it would have been for the police officers involved. And here's the fundamental question that I think anybody who cares about not just the health and safety of first responders, but their own loved ones should be asking themselves. If paramedics in Edmonton, and as we saw from the earlier DMs across the province, are so under-resourced that they can't get to a first responder, another first responder, a police officer in their moment of crisis, how does Dani think that she can run a police service? Because the whole argument is, hey, everybody, nobody should have to wait to have a police officer respond in their moment of need. But Dani already runs the EMS service in the province of Alberta, and Dani can't manage getting paramedics to cops when cops need them. This isn't the first instance. A quick Google search reveals multiple stories of police officers who have had to be transported in multiple municipalities across the province of Alberta in the backs of police cars because there were no ambulances available at that time. And if you're going to judge somebody by anything, one of the good data points is probably their track record. And the long-standing story, we've had Mike Parker on the show, the long-standing concerns around the availability of ambulances in this province should be a testament to the fact that if we can't, as a government, if the current government cannot manage making sure that ambulances are showing up to people when they need them, making sure that there are always ambulances available, why in God's green earth would anyone make the argument that we should put them in charge of the cops too? We should have a provincial police force that Dani has full control over. It's absolutely bonkers. And we're almost at the end. This is going to be like an hour and a half show. It's very exciting. And again, just to be clear, in that little tirade there, all of the opinions that I shared were mine. I do not claim to represent anybody other than the breakdown and myself. That's a Facebook post. The DMs we received were from anonymous DMs, just to be clear. Okay, moving on from there. I don't want to do this one. I don't want to do this one. I've talked to a couple people this week about how I do not want to do this one. And I take no pleasure in what I am about to do right now. And I probably have to do all of the even more, it's the disclosure show, even more boilerplate disclosures, because we're going to be talking about the Alberta Party, or the Progressive Tory Party. Anybody who knows, who's been following the show for quite some time, knows that I got involved with the Alberta Party. Excuse me, and I think it was 2017. I ran for the Alberta Party in the provincial election in 2019. I got my ass kicked. Worked out well for me because I got the breakdown. I think I got the better end of that deal for sure. But I do have a very reasonably long history with the organization formerly known as the Alberta Party. And I'm going to share something here tonight that I don't know that I've ever shared publicly. Because I feel like, for context and to really identify my biases, it would be remiss of me not to acknowledge this and put this out into the ether. After the 2019 election and Stephen Mandel stepped down as the Alberta Party leader, I expressed a great deal of frustration with the provincial board about the fact that they allowed the Alberta Party to be leaderless for months. It may have been at least a year. And I expressed a great deal of frustration with the fact that the way that the party ran things, the board, I want to be clear, talking about the board, the way that the board at the time ran things is they had very little regard for the rules that they were supposed to be following. There were people who were just writing policy and making an official party policy, even though it hadn't been voted on by the membership, which was antithetical to the idea of what I believed the Alberta Party was supposed to be about, and certainly what the stated principles of the Alberta Party were. So there was a little bit of friction, and there may have been some sketches on the breakdown about the Alberta Party, and at a certain point, there may have been conversations about me becoming the I believe that the correct term is acting leader of the Alberta Party, and I ended up blowing that up because people were doing things that I did not like, and I withdrew my name from it. So there it is. There was a brief period of time where in a different universe, Marvel multiverse style, Nate could have ended up as the Alberta Party leader. Thank God, though he did not, because I think I probably would have not done well given the circumstances. And again, I get the breakdown, so I still win. But all of that out in the ether, there's some history there that I wanted to make sure that I acknowledged, because it's time to take the Alberta Party out to the woodshed again. And in order to do that, we got to talk about some of the events of the last little bit. So to start with, let's take a look at this tweet from December 9th. This is from it was the leader of the Alberta Party. It is now the Progressive Tory Party. Peter Guthrie, December 9th, 6:04 p.m. Together for Alberta. I am honored to officially join the Alberta Party as its leader. Albertans deserve honesty, accountability, and a government that builds. They want stability, strong communities, protected services, and opportunities to thrive. This is the progressive conservative that we're shaping for Alberta. Together, we will restore confidence, reverse efforts that undermine our democratic institutions, and return normal, responsive government to Alberta. This is our purpose. This is our path. And regardless of the name we carry, our movement continues. Now, that was after months of litigation and law threats and a bunch of other different things that were going on, because back in July, Peter Guthrie and the Alberta Party announced they were going to team up, and they had an AGM, and they announced they were going to rebrand themselves as the Progressive Conservative Party. And Danielle Smith said, oh, no, you don't. And there was a lawsuit. But Elections Alberta had given them approval to use the Progressive Conservative name. And so then, in the spirit of democracy, as Danny does, she just wrote a law saying that nobody else can use the word conservative in the province of Alberta. You just don't get to use that word, because there will only be one flavor of conservative in Alberta, and you will like it. You will like it. So December 9th, Peter Guthrie announces that he's going to be the leader of the Alberta Party. And on this week, December 19th, Peter Guthrie officially announced, it's official. We have moved forward as the Progressive Tory Party of Alberta, a progressive conservative option focused on accountability, stability, and a government that works for people. Vote Tory, #ToryAB. So, okay. Peter Guthrie came in, and very quickly, we have a new party name. So the Alberta Party, the Alberta Party, we got a little graphic and everything. And I love, this is the only reason why I find AI useful, is because I can ask it to put an Alberta Party logo on a casket, and it does it, and it gets the depth of the casket and everything just perfectly. But this raised some questions, because Peter Guthrie announces that he's the new leader of the Alberta Party. Cool. There are two flavors of leader in the Alberta Party ecosystem. And to be clear, even with the name change, the Constitution and the bylaws that exist for the Alberta Party still govern, in theory, the organization that is now the Progressive Tory Party of Alberta. we gotta take a look at those for a quick second here, because there's some things and stuff that needs to be well, before we do that, even, let's get to the questions, because in the Alberta Party Constitution, there are, like I said, two flavors of leader. There are acting leaders or interim leaders. I think it's interim. Let's just pull up the Constitution. Pulling up the Constitution so that I don't make a fool out of myself. There is a acting leader. It is acting. Okay, there we go. I did not do terrible there. So there is an acting leader that exists within the Alberta Party, and this is the mechanism by which, if the Alberta Party loses their leader, the board can appoint a new leader. So I'll read from that. This is Section F of the Alberta Party Constitution. In the event that the leader is unable to continue as leader, this would be presumably then acting leader Lindsay Amtaya resigning. In the event the leader is unable to continue as leader, or the leader will be a candidate in the leadership vote, the provincial executive shall, in consultation with the caucus, they don't have, they got like two, select an acting leader until the leadership vote is complete and a new leader is named. The acting leader shall not be eligible to be a candidate in the leadership vote. And so this was where we started to have some questions. And certainly I started to have some questions, because they didn't have a leadership vote. There was no leadership vote. The board, one day, Peter Guthrie was just like, poof, he's the leader. Okay, cool. So the question then became, all right, well, is he the acting leader then? And does that mean that he's not going to be running in the next leadership race? What's going on here? This all seems very confusing. Because the board does not have the power in the Constitution of the Alberta Party to just appoint, we'll call it a permanent leader. They would just say leader, but we'll call it a permanent leader. And so we reached out to the folks at the Alberta Party and we said, hey, cool, how'd that go? And we got a response. I'll endeavor to provide some clarity around MLA Guthrie's new role with the Alberta Party at its December 7th meeting. So 2 days before Peter Guthrie accepted the role as Alberta Party leader. So I want to be very, very clear here. I am not dunking on Peter Guthrie tonight. I reserve the right to do that in the future, but I'm not dunking on Peter Guthrie tonight. At the December 7th meeting, the board of directors, acting within its authority, passed a motion to appoint Airdrie Cochrane MLA Peter Guthrie leader of the Alberta Party. The Alberta Party has been gaining momentum, and the UCP have gone out of its way to complicate things for us, specifically since our August 29th application to Elections Alberta for name change to the Alberta Progressive Conservative Party. From injunctions to lawsuits to Bill 14, they've thrown multiple roadblocks in our path. Now there are rumblings about a spring election. Again, there's not going to be a spring election. Being leaderless at the call of an election was non sequitur for our board. We passed a motion to delay a leadership contest until the next AGM, followed by a motion to appoint Guthrie. And so we did the responsible thing and said, okay, so you made him the leader. Is he the acting leader then? Can you clarify? What is the terminology that we're using here? And we got ghosted. We have not been able to get, for a week now, a statement clarifying officially how it was that the Alberta Party board decided to forego a leadership race entirely and to just appoint a new permanent leader to their party. And I understand that the Alberta Party, the new Progressive Tory Party, is in a vulnerable place right now, because having a leadership race, if you believe that there's going to be a spring election, I mean, the timing for that ain't great, for sure. But I'm not sure that means you get to break the rules, your own rules. Because here's the problem. As soon as you start to say, well, we've got these rules, but we don't want to follow these rules because it's an emergency, we start to go down a pathway. And this is where I want to bring that Constitution back up, because it is really important to understand what the rules were. And to be clear, we've run this past some of the folks who drafted this Constitution, one of whom is a lawyer, and they have said, yeah, no, there's no mechanism by which the Alberta Party, now the Progressive Tory Party, can just appoint their own leader and go la la la. So, according to the rules, the leadership vote shall be called in accordance with Article 9D when the leader delivers written notice to the president of his or her intention to resign. So that should have been when Lindsay Amatea resigned like a month and a half ago, when the leader of the position of leader otherwise becomes vacant. If more than 50% of the votes cast in Article 9D are the affirmative, and to be clear, Article 9D says at the annual general meeting immediately following a provincial general election where a leadership vote is not underway, there should be a question, do you want a leadership vote? So after every election, there is a theoretical guarantee that there should be a leadership vote in the Alberta Party. That's if they are able to get their shit together and have actual AGMs. That's a non sequitur. The leader shall be elected by a majority. This will go down to number B. The leader shall be elected by a majority vote of the members of the party personally casting a secret ballot following the standard procedure of preferential ballot when more than 2 candidates participate. To be eligible to vote in a leadership vote, an individual must be a member in good standing of the party immediately prior to the vote as determined in the provincial board set out in the notice of the leadership vote. Now, there is Section E, which says when a leadership vote is to be called, the provincial executive shall, within 15 days, announce the date on which the leadership vote will be held. Notice shall be provided to all members of the party, but for the provincial executive. So it's basically just saying if they're going to have a leadership vote, this is how they have to do it. Where extraordinary circumstances make it necessary, extraordinary circumstances being undefined, a leadership vote can be suspended beyond 9 months from the date of the event that triggered the leadership vote by supermajority at the meeting of a provincial board. It cannot be suspended again. We already did Article F, which says that the acting leader, which is the only one that the board can appoint, can't be a candidate in the next leadership race. The provincial board shall establish the procedures and mechanisms whereby the leadership vote should be conducted, and then it goes into what you have to have in order to be considered the leader. Now, to be clear, I do not believe, I have no reason to believe that Mr. Guthrie was particularly well versed in the Alberta Party Constitution. One would, however, hope that the members of the board would know how to read a legal constitution and would know how to read a legal document, because the only possible speculative explanation that any of the people that we've talked to while we've been trying to figure this thing out could come up with is maybe the board thought that they could use Section G, which is the provincial board shall establish the procedures and mechanisms whereby the leadership vote shall be conducted. And they just decided, using their authority, that they were going to say, well, we're going to say all of the other sections don't matter. We're just going to pick this one, and we're going to say, because we have an emergency and there might be an election, there's no writ drop yet, we're going to say that Peter Guthrie can be the permanent leader of the Alberta Party, and that's that. And that's not how it works. The reason why G is because it's subject to letters A through F. All of those other things are more important than G. So if that is how they went about doing it, it's not great. Because here's the problem with saying emergency circumstances and things have been hard and all of that is, for the party that has rebranded itself as the Progressive Tory Party. That's entirely the wrong graphic. For the party that has branded itself as the Progressive Tory Party, to say, hey, Danielle Smith, she's just the worst. We need to have conservative values. We need to have respect for the rule of law. We need to have principles, to say, but we don't want to follow our own rules, is not a great starting block. And I would make the argument that the board of the Alberta Party did Peter Guthrie no favors by choosing to disregard their own rules. This is the problem. This is the fundamental problem that we have in politics, in the province of Alberta, in the country of Canada, in the world of earth, people who get their hands on a little bit of power think that the rules don't apply, and they can turn themselves into pretzels to come up with all kinds of different justifications for why the rules don't apply in this moment to them. But it cuts both ways, because if we're going to say exigent circumstances mean that we don't have to follow the rules, then all of a sudden all the procurement concerns around the Turkish Tylenot, well, that's fine. That's totally fine. Nobody has any reason to raise any questions about that, despite the fact that the Wyant report came out and said that there absolutely were conflicts of interest and the normal rules for procurement weren't followed. It's okay. It was an emergency. We had to do what we had to do. It was an exigent threat. We need to have a provincial police force. We need to do that, because immigration, these immigrants, they're out of control. And we don't know what the RCMP are going to do. That was that one napkin white note that Justin Trudeau wrote that has been largely disavowed, that said maybe we should stop policing with the RCMP. And then we got a whole new prime minister who's made no indication whatsoever that that he's going to do that. But I heard this one time in a Facebook group that there were some people who were upset at the RCMP. That's a real problem. We have to deal with that right away. We need to get our own provincial police force to set our sovereignty. They're hurting the kids. They're hurting the kids. I read in a Facebook group that they're mutilating the genitals of children. Oh my gosh. Is it true? I don't know. Sounds scary. Sounds like a real threat. Sounds like something that we need to deal with right away. Well, let's just use the notwithstanding clause to insert politicians into the doctor's offices of trained and qualified physicians who are providing gender-affirming care to youth navigating gender dysphoria with the support of their parents. Let's just say that that can't be a thing anymore, because I read a scary thing on Facebook. It wasn't true, but it was scary. I felt threatened. I had to do what I had to do. But where it really gets to be a problem, when we start to have people in positions of power who believe that they are above the rules that are put in place to keep that power in check, is that we can start to manufacture bullshit. We can straight up just say, hey, you know what? Oh, the teachers strike. Yeah, we got to make sure that the kids aren't hurt. We read somewhere that after 4 weeks, after 4 weeks, kids, their ability to learn, it gets sewered. It gets absolutely sewered. We're going to have to use the notwithstanding clause. And then only after the notwithstanding clause has been deployed and we have robbed tens of thousands of teachers of their charter rights, then we'll say it was about the money. That will totally own up to the fact that it was never about the kids. It was about the money. We didn't want to go to arbitration because we chronically underfund education in this province, and it might actually come to light that we're not doing what we should be doing in order to set our kids up for success. And we might be forced by arbitration to pay up, finally, to make sure the kids are going to get the education that they deserve and the future of the province requires of them. I don't want to do that. I don't want to follow the rules. That sounds like work. That sounds like effort. And that's the problem. As soon as anybody starts to say, this situation, I get to throw the rule book out now. I get to do what I want. As soon as we do that, it's just degrees. That's all it is. Has Danielle Smith done far worse things than what the board of the Alberta Party appears to have done? I even told them I was going to do this tonight. I was like, please, if there's a justification, if there's something that I'm missing, please send it my way. Because if there's something I'm missing, I don't want to have to go and drag you guys, because I really do believe that this province does need a principled conservative option that's not the UCP. I think that we need to have a conversation for conservatives in this province, not saying that I am one, but I think that we need to have a conversation about maybe the far right extreme wing of conservatism that has called itself the United Conservative Party isn't so united. Maybe there's a lot of people who are entirely reasonable, who don't want to see any of the batshit crazy policies that Danielle Smith didn't campaign on and is implementing nonetheless against the will of the people, which she acknowledged in the Alberta Next report, with 52% of Albertans being against policing. Albertans deserve to have that option available to them. And it is abhorrent that Danielle Smith legislated away the use of the name conservative. That is some dystopian level bullshit. That is the action of somebody who's afraid. And that, to me, is why the Alberta Party, or the Progressive Tory Party as it is now, I'm going to make the switch. I just need to keep it for this bit. That is why they have to be principled, because otherwise we're just rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. And again, I want to be clear. I have no reason whatsoever to believe that Peter Guthrie knew about the constitutional mechanisms, or that he was in any way involved in this. I did ask for, like I said, that statement from the Alberta Party, now the Progressive Tory Party. What happened? How did it happen? Somebody please explain it. And they simply refused to. And that's really, again, really, really unfortunate. Because as we've talked about before on the show, the polling clearly shows that if Albertans are presented with a legitimate progressive conservative option, Danny loses government. And if we get minority government, cool. I don't have a problem with based on what I've seen in the legislature from the past couple of months with Peter Guthrie. I don't have a problem with him either being in charge with a NDP minority government, or them teaming up, or whatever. I would love to go back to the days where different political parties could work together on the things that they agree on, instead of having a governing party that simply refuses to listen to anybody other than Danny, and I guess Rob. I would love to have that. But if they're going to start by just running roughshod over their own rules, that's not great. And one of the things that we have said since day one at the breakdown is nobody gets a pass. And I don't like the idea that I'm ending 2025 by dragging the option that might be the best chance at playing a role in diversifying the types of parties that are reasonable and available to Albertans. I don't like that. But if I don't, then I'm not sticking to my principles. So here we are. I do think it's funny, though, that the board of the now Progressive Tory Party apparently chose the name Tory, and did so immediately after they decided that they were going to run roughshod over their own constitution and just disregard the rules. Because if you take a look at the etymology of the word Tory, going to the good folks at Wikipedia, the word Tory derives from the English, my Gaelic is terrible, Torai, meaning outlaw. It entered the English language in the 17th century when it was used to describe Irish outlaws who survived by committing acts of robbery and plunder against English settlers. So that's the source of the word Tory. Isn't it ironic? Don't you think? And that's it. That's what we got. That's the end of 2025. I got a couple things that I want to say, and then we're gonna wrap it up for the year. I want to sincerely start with a thank you. This year has been something else. One for the books. Probably gonna write one day. It was literally just it was December 19th of 2024 that the breakdown and I were sued with the $6 million lawsuit by Sam Mraiche and MH Care. it was that triggered something of a financial and existential crisis for me and the show. And the wonderful people of Alberta stepped up and made sure that I was not left out to dry. I cannot express enough gratitude for that. I simply can't. I could do a half hour of just saying thank you, and it still wouldn't be sufficient. The support that I and the show has received has been tremendous. It has been a tremendous gift to be able to continue to do the show, and it has been a tremendous gift. And I haven't talked about this a whole lot, but I'm going to say it now. The support that you all have shown for the show through the GoFundMe for the lawsuit, that saved so much stress and distress on my family. Knowing that we would have the ability to fight back was a tremendous gift that you all gave us last year. So I just want to say thank you so much for that. The way that people stuck through and continued to support the show as we had our shutdown, when I had my charter rights taken away from me for 2 weeks. I lost my freedom of expression in the province of Alberta in 2025. And the show had to go dark. The messages of support, they kept me going through that whole period there. Being able to turn the lights back on, and all of the support that we've gotten since then has been absolutely tremendous. And it is the reason why I keep going with the show. Despite all of the fuckery that is deployed in my direction. This year has also seen me get a complaint to my union because of the work that I do with the breakdown. Totally unrelated to anything that I do professionally, as a paramedic. But that was defeated, by the way. That got squashed. So, right. This is, it is, I found out this year that when the former HSCO, my boss's boss, put in her affidavit that the Premier's office allegedly tried to have me fired not once but twice. I found that out this year. This has been an absolutely bonkers year, but I'm still here. The show's still here, and it's all because of you people. So I want to end the year by saying thank you. Thank you for the support. Thank you for choosing to tune in with the live stuff. Thank you to everybody who shows up week after week after week with the chat. Thank you for everybody who holds me accountable and who is willing to have conversations with me about, oh, maybe that's not the best time to swing, or maybe that's not the right way to swing. All of that is so critically important. I have the best crowdsourced editorial board in the in media. Period. End of sentence. And I am so grateful for the fact that when we have those conversations about, well, here's what I think, and this is why I think this is important. People engage in a dialogue. It's a conversation. It's not just, it very often comes off as just me ranting, but it's not just me ranting. And that means absolutely everything to me. That's what I think there's a couple things I got to do before we go, but that's what I think I want to end the year on. It has been just a tremendous privilege to be able to do this show and have all of you show up. So thank you all so much for all of that. And with that, we'll do the plugs, and then you know what's coming next. Although I am so close to wanting to add the Danny math, because 96,000 of the 85,000. But I'm not gonna do that this time. So it's too late for shipping. But if you don't get what you've always wanted for Christmas, I'm such a bad salesman. Anyways, here's the merch. You can go to the breakdownabmerch.ca. The good folks at Oddities have done an amazing job of running our whole merch store. We've got the hoodies, the t-shirts, the zip-up hoodies, the pullover hoodies. Maybe not so much with the tank tops just right yet. But we've got all of that stuff with those folks there. You can get all of that at the breakdownabmerch.ca. In addition to that, and our Patreon supporters, man, that was such a blast last night. That was just so fun to just be able to do that little event that we did online. If you want to help to support the show, if you want to make sure that we can try to get the most that we can get out of the province's broken FOIP system now, then you can help support us by signing up to be one of our Patreons at www.patreon.com/thebreakdownab. And if you're not somebody who's super down on the monthly commitment thing, you can always help us to keep the lights on by sending an e-transfer to info@thebreakdownab.ca. And that's what we got. So thanks, everybody. And with that, before we go, you know what's got to happen before we wrap it up.
How's your BS detector evolved over time?
I tend to be pretty trusting.
It's like she's saying, I got the answer right? That's like a 2-3 year old clip. And it's still just fills up my cup every single time. Thank you all so much for an amazing year. Look forward to returning in the new year. In the meantime and in between time, keep the DMs coming. And we're going to keep doing what we do. We do have some developments on the legal front that we'll announce as soon as I get permission from the lawyers. We're far from done, but we're in a position where we're pushing back in new ways, which is I'm very happy about. So all of that being said, thank you all so much. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, or the Festivus, or if it's just a Wednesday or Thursday or whatever for you, that's cool too. From all of us here at The Breakdown to all of you, wish you nothing but the best. Take care of each other. And as always, keep the conversation going.